Good afternoon. Thank you for coming in on one of 2 sunny days we had this week so far, and listening to a conversation on Istanbul and the independent initiatives that are happening in Istanbul right now. My name is Abaseh Mirvali, and I'm very, very pleased to be able to moderate this conversation. And I'm just going to give you a bit of what the next 30 minutes will look like. For the first 15 minutes, we're going to talk a little bit, each of the panelists are going to talk a little bit about, not only about the initiative that they have created, they have nurtured, they are nurturing, but also the framework that it's established in and where it comes from, how it came to happen. And then in the next 15 minutes, we will tie that not only together, but to the other institutions and other independent work that is being done in Istanbul and other places in Turkey. We are mindful, obviously, of the political and social situation right now in the country, and we've all spoken, as we are not representatives officially of any institution, of any political party or anything. We are individuals, and the opinions that are expressed by each of us are our personal opinions and should be taken as such, not of our Basels or of anything else. We decided that we are going to address for a few moments how we think what is going on right now shapes kind of the thinking behind the different initiatives that we're pursuing in Istanbul and in Turkey. So what are the reasons that led to wanting to create an independent project is always interesting to me, having lived in Turkey and countries that the contemporary scene is younger and new. I often find that the projects that come out in some way add so much more to the dialogue. And I am curious in particular to hear kind of the nexus of the projects that are being presented here today and how they're contributing to enriching the community, to creating a new layer of dialogue, and whether they're bringing in new actors onto the scene that maybe were not part of the scene before. As we have this conversation, you're going to see a loop of pictures. Most of them are of Collectorspace, but there are some that are also from Protocinema, and there aren't any images of Merve's project because it's on the internet, it's a written word, and so you know what text looks like. So, so we didn't feel like we had to show it to you in that format. But I think that it would be important to highlight the unique aspects of each of these initiatives and how they're different and unique to the context of Istanbul and Turkey. And I was going to start with you, Haro, and to talk a little bit about Collectorspace and how you define yourself first. How would you define yourself, if someone said, and why are you here at Art Basel?
First of all, thank you so much for organizing this panel. I think it's great that we get such a platform to talk about our initiatives. It means a lot to us. Of course, it does feel a little strange to be here at Art Basel talking about our little contemporary art initiative while people in Istanbul are on the streets, sometimes being gassed. But somebody has to do the hard job, so here we are. Yes, you will see pictures of our space in Istanbul. It is actually on or very close to Taksim Square, so where the protests started and still going on. And towards the end of the loop, you will also see the effects of the protests, the writings on the walls and windows that we really liked, and then how they got cleaned by the police. But so we are leaving it where it is. Obviously, I personally support any initiative that will expand freedom of expression. And aside the quite sad fact that a lot of people got injured and some actually lost their lives throughout this process, I am very positive about these demonstrations because it shows me that the Turkish people have not lost their instinct to to protest, and I think that's the first step towards achieving our goals. We have to consider that for the longest time, Turkey lived under an authoritarian rule with the military hanging over every decision. So these type of movements are positive developments in my mind. Obviously, there is potentially a painful period in front of us, and hopefully, with everybody's support, also from the international community, we will get where we need to go.
So maybe you can tell a little bit about the nexus of Collectorspace and how you define yourself. Are you you're a collector, and you're a patron, and you're...
That's right. I used to live in New York. I lived in the US for quite a long time, and started collecting moving image art, mostly being involved with institutions and getting to learn about art that way. There was, obviously, there is no formal education for a collector, so I'm basically self-taught. One thing that I really enjoyed in the process was visiting private collections for many reasons, but it was also very educational for me to visit someone's home and listen to them, why they do what they do, and how they live with art, how they present the art on their walls or wherever they present it. So that was something I really enjoyed. When I moved to London with my family, started going back to Istanbul, where I was born, more often, and the scene was so vibrant. A lot of energy, a lot of interest in collecting and in contemporary art in general. Also, the commercial engine was running pretty smoothly at that point. Things had started going on, and obviously there was the history with the Biennial, so Istanbul was already on the map of the international scene. But one thing that I thought was maybe missing compared to a place like New York or London was the variety of reference points in terms of what a collection can look like, can represent. Because obviously the institutional collections take time to establish, and even though there are a number of very good private collections, it's still a handful, or the numbers are limited compared to a center like New York or London. So the idea was to maybe simulate a private collection visit, bring collectors who are reference-worthy, who would bring a different point of view into the discussion to Istanbul, into our tiny space.
How big is your space?
It's 20 square meters, but we think that it's much bigger because we are on Taksim Square, and thousands, tens of thousands of people pass by every day. And some of them notice us, a lot of them don't, but the nice thing is that many people who wouldn't visit a museum or go to a gallery get to be exposed to some sort of crazy piece of artwork.
So how are you simulating a visit to a private space, and when did it start? When was the first one?
We started back in 2011, so this is our second anniversary with the Biennial, hopefully. And what we do is we bring a single artwork from the private collection. Because of our space limitations, we had to be limited to a certain amount of artworks, and we thought that one is probably the right number. We wanted to put the spotlight on the artwork because that's where everything starts with collecting. So we thought we would give an artwork a solo show. So that's on display in the front of the gallery. And in the back, we have a video that shows the collector's home, and often how the artwork is presented at their home. In that case, you just saw the feet of Madame Blavatsky, which is a work by Goshka Makuga, and we had it in our front area, and in the video you could see how it looked in the entry hall of the collector's home. and the collectors talk on the video about their approach. And the idea is that if we bring different collectors from different regions with different points of views, we can open up different discussions, and everyone can learn something from it, including us. We also would like to bring some criticality to collecting. That's maybe the biggest ambition that we have, because unless you get objective feedback, you don't get better at what you do. And in everything else that we do, we are subject to review, which is something that is lacking in the collecting area. I'm not sure we can actually impose that kind of structure in collecting, but even talking about it, I think, is useful for collectors to think about the responsibilities of collecting. Right. That it's not something that we do because we have money and we can afford the artworks and we can do whatever we want with them. So those are the discussions that we would like to open up. We have a little publication that goes with every exhibition where we commission texts by independent writers to visit the collection and give us their opinion.
Well, we'll come back to how it's working and what goals it's actually achieving at the 2-year marker. Mary, why don't you talk a little bit about the project and when it started, when the first film was, and what it's all about?
Okay. All right, great. So the name of my organization is Protocinema.
Can everyone hear? Okay.
Am I on?
Yeah, no, you're on.
And the title Protocinema comes from Werner Herzog's film, The Cave of Forgotten Dreams. And in the film, it's about the drawings, the oldest drawings known to man. And there are figures with 8 legs. And he asked, why do these beasts have 8 legs when the cavemen know very well that they have 4 legs? And he surmises, maybe this is man's first attempt to represent motion. Maybe this is proto-cinema. So what I did is I made an art organization that's always in motion, and I wanted a name that embodied motion. So with Protocinema, I do 2 shows a year in New York, 2 shows a year in Istanbul, and they're always in different spaces. And I wanted something that was responsive to what artists' needs were and taking context into consideration. And so I started in spring of 2011 with a show by Mario Garcia Torres, an artist we both love, in the Lower East Side, and you love it, in Manhattan, in Lower East Side. So yeah.
And how are they different? How is the project that you do, you know, how do you select the artist? How do you select the artwork, the artist, and why in one city and not in the other? What's the premise?
That's a good question, thank you. For me, the primary concern is to open up dialogue on every level possible, and just for me to be able to go to Istanbul and get exposed to different ideas, and then be a cross-pollinator in each city, outside of my personal sensibility and personal concerns connected to my own history. I want to show an artist in each city that doesn't already have a lot of exposure there. So they may not have a gallery, or they may not have a big museum show, and the audience might not already know a lot. Not that they're totally unknown,
right?
But it's about introductions. So that means artists from anywhere in Istanbul and artists from anywhere in New York, but making a lot of introductions, introducing their work to curators, collectors, general public, writers, and so on.
Do you think there's an intellectual or like an artistic discourse that's coming through, like several themes that are suddenly starting to manifest themselves? Is it naturally going that way?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like when an artist makes an artwork and they don't know what the work's about until after they start making it, and you find out on the journey. A lot of my concerns are related to behavior modifications, mind control, culture modification, and how we behave in the world, like what makes us function the way that we do, and thinking about them and being critical and aware of them. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And Merve, your platform is really different, and I think in a nice way, this conversation can be summarized about different platforms. How did you create, where were you when you created, you guys came to create your m-est?
So m-est was founded, actually, we're also 2 years old, so it was also founded in 2011. I founded it, and soon afterwards 2 other wonderful writers, curators got involved, who are unfortunately not here today. But basically we founded it as a way of, I mean, m-est was always founded as an online project, and it's very dear to us to have, like, promote this form of online publication.
Where were you when you
I was in New York back in the day, and so I was really interested in this idea of like a spaceless publication that was obviously had a space, but had a space that could be populated from different cities around the world and from different places, but that came together through the electronic and other forms of dialogues that we were already having. So in a way, it was about bringing people together and making transparent the dialogues that were already happening public. So it was actually coming from a very personal place of, one, we were having great conversations over email or Skype or over coffee, and we wanted to make sure that those conversations could be public.
So you kind of formalized something that was happening informally.
Exactly. So it was very much about, you know, like, these are already great emails, why don't we share them in public, was, I think, the very, very beginning point. But obviously it became something else over time, but that was really the excitement that started our project at the beginning.
And when you moved to Istanbul, how did it shape then? Because we have a relationship. She wrote a text for a show that I curated, and you write a lot. And to me, I'm very obsessed with this documentation of the current history of contemporary art in Istanbul, which is young and it's in development. And how are you all being a part of that documenting?
I mean, the beginning of m-est was definitely trying to figuring out this idea of Middle Easternness that we all, especially living abroad, I think this was an issue of, you know, trying to figure out what being from the Middle East or being from Istanbul or Turkey or however you want to call it.
Or if it is the Middle East.
If there is such a meaning. So we first of all tried to play with that idea, and what the practices that come from here have in common was, I think, a question. And then over time, I think there was something about tracing this that definitely does have that art historical or historical concern, historicizing our coordinates and what do we relate to. And that's, I think, the informal conversation, that's where the informal conversation becomes really important, because you do have it on many different levels with very different people, and then that then becomes about putting the coordinates on the map rather than historicizing or forming a narrative. And so that kind of writing, that's why it's at the heart of m-est, and that's why we care about it so much.
Let me bring in a conversation that we were having in the back room, which is because of the events that are happening in Istanbul, everybody kind of evaluated their role and what our role should be. Should we stop working? What should we be doing? It would be interesting, I think, for people to hear kind of, why don't we start with you, Merve, like what you guys thought, how could be a supportive, active form of expression of what's going on?
So it's the three of us, and I think there was an immediate unanimous decision to stop working when this happened, and this means our jobs, our freelance jobs, but also m-est, and so we basically made the site dysfunctional the minute this happened. So we deactivated the archive, and then on the front page there's only an image that has now become the symbol of the protest, and we said we condemn what's happening and then hope for something.
What is the symbol for some people that might not know?
So basically on the I think on the very first day of the protest there was a woman in a red dress who got tear gas from very up close, and then there was a stencil that was created from this, which was basically where the police was really small and the woman was much bigger than him. And so, I mean, so the idea being that the tear gas makes us bigger and brings us closer. So we basically put that on the main page, which is a very simple sign of solidarity, and we haven't been doing anything related to m-est or anything else for 2 weeks. So there's an informal strike, I think.
Right, but while you haven't been doing anything formally with m-est, what have you been doing then?
As people who live in Istanbul, I think there's a lot of things that we could do. One of which was we transcribed certain texts that, you know, the certain speeches that were being delivered. We translated parts of these texts. You can always be donating money or walking and helping people out, and just, you know, like people who have been on the front from the day one, they can rest and then you can go instead of them. So I think your bodily presence is really important right now. So that's what we've been trying to do, because at the end of the day, we're 3 young people. That's the best we can do right now.
I focus on Merve because she literally arrived last night, so she was the last one to be in Istanbul and discussing this. But yeah. What about the rest of you? How would you like to share what you pondered or what came to your mind? Mary, you brought up when we were talking that we don't know how much you know, or, you know, life is complicated. We all have to follow certain conversations in our lives. But, you know, the nature of the group that's out in the park, they're very young. For many of them, it's the first time they've ever protested. It's the first time they're voicing their opinion. And I actually asked the group, what was the original goal, and was there a goal? What is the goal now? And I think that conversation would be interesting to share.
Well, I think it's important to know that when this happened, which started about protecting a park that was going to be destroyed to put in different kinds of architecture. One thing would be a shopping mall and potentially other things. And many people grouped together to say, no, we don't want this, because there was no vote for it. It was just put on.
Yeah.
And then when that happened, it's not a political group, it's people from all different walks of life. And then it also happened in 237 cities across the country. And it was just people that want their voices to be heard. They have all different voices. And many of the people are very young, and they're not even at the voting age yet. And it is completely peaceful. There's a library there, there's free food, they're cleaning up, or the protesters are cleaning up trash, and there's open air cinema. It's very peaceful, and the reaction from the police across the nation has been more than brutal. And so now this is what we're against.
So you were saying that it's now become about freedom of speech? No.
I would say so, but
Yeah.
you're right in that I think at the beginning most people just participated out of just sheer
It was a reaction.
But a peaceful reaction, I think, is really important to emphasize. We were just upset at what were happening and what we saw on our iPhones, very removed from the front, and then that's why the front had to be populated
Right.
by people.
And Haro, you were saying that there was graffiti on your facade?
Yes, because of our location, we are right in the middle of
Yeah.
everything
there it
that's
is.
happening.
There it is.
Yeah, this is what it looked like, and we really cherish this because this.
Can you
this
translate some of it?
Was, probably not.
Well, Devrim is good.
So revolution. Oh, this is. I don't think requires an explanation.
Yeah. But you were saying that it was cleaned?
Basically, it was cleaned in a way that it was painted over, and the way we showed our solidarity
So
was to
that's-
leave them on.
Yeah.
We didn't intend to clean anything, but this is what happened.
This is what happened. I mean, that
when
says a
the
lot.
police moved in, basically.
But
This is just symbolic of a major concern that when all this was happening across the entire country, the national television was not covering it. There were penguins on the TV,
documentary on
cook
penguins.
shows on the TV. They were not covering it, and to the extent that. Say it again.
Yes, they didn't switch
Good
it
point.
off like in
yeah,
Greece.
thank you. And then to the extent that in Izmir, 1.35 tweeters were arrested. They were
Right.
then released, and then some other tweeters. So you couldn't even,
Dude.
the freedom of speech was blocked quite dramatically, and freedom of the press and so forth.
And kind of bringing it back to why we're here at this conversation about the independent spaces, I did like the fact that you were saying that it makes you evaluate art, also art and what we're involved in and the medium that we're working in, and where do you stop and pause. And
I think exploitation becomes really
Yeah.
easy. Also thinking about that we're all people of the word and we're all articulate in what we can say. And then I was from the very beginning hesitant to be saying something or saying too much, because at the end of the day, I think this is not yet articulated. And this shifting form is exactly what we should be a part of, because and especially as Mary has pointed out, since this is something that involves people from different backgrounds, different ages and everything, that our presence should definitely be out there rather than at home or doing something else or trying to put a label on something that doesn't have a label yet. So I think that's something that
that's important.
personally care a lot about. So.
And taking it back to what you're individually doing, the projects that you've, I shy away, and I have to say that I pointed out to them that I thought it was really interesting in a culture, most of the time in cultures like ours, and I'm Iranian, American of Iranian heritage, and I lived in Turkey and Mexico. We kind of shy away from showing the favela side of life, or that's not something we put on because it's part of our life. We don't need to put it on display for anyone to really partake in. The three initiatives that you see are extremely discreet, which really goes against the norm in the culture. Traditionally, we're much more splashy, and I was really kind of surprised, and I was wondering whether that was because of the time spent abroad and like you didn't have the need to make something bigger, or why it was so discreet, and whether you think that your message is being conveyed. being
Oh,
that
yeah.
discreet? Do you think it's reaching an audience? What, like at the 2-year marker, at the 1-year marker, what are some of the goals that you think you've achieved? How have you changed the scene or contributing to the scene? And what are your goals? And is this a 3-year project? Is it a 5-year project? Is it a 10-year project? So maybe we can start with you, Merve.
All right, to go back to the beginning of a nice group of questions. Yeah, it's not American to do something small. Usually things are done very big.
Right.
And for me, I wanted to start small with the hope that little by little, if it goes well, it will grow. But also it's just an expression of my personality. I don't feel very big. I thought I could be more nimble and move with things and then modify as things changed.
Now, I think this is an interesting juncture for you to say a little bit about your background, and because it's so different in some ways, and how you came to this,
right.
and how you're leveraging or using or not that background in what you're doing now.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going. So the past 20 years, I was working in galleries, and most recently 303 Galleries, director there for 12 years. And then slowly over time, I wanted to take the skills and resources and knowledge and relationships that I have in New York and in the international art community and see what else could I do with these things. And one of the things I thought was exciting was going to a place that I didn't know and introducing them to, and making new friends there and introducing them to the other friends that I had, and then going both ways. And that what I could offer is experience as an art dealer, knowledge about managing and selling and making exhibitions and getting the word out to writers and curators, and opening up the dialogue for everyone else that I have contact with. So that's been a huge part of the exciting thing that I'm doing right now.
And are you seeing concrete results?
No, I'm seeing slow results.
Yeah.
In the way that it takes time when you put an artist in a show and then you start this dialogue, and then a few months later someone says, hey, what was the name of that artist? I want to put them in another show. And a collector says, oh yeah, is that the same person you told me about last year? And it takes time. These things are organic, and to build it solid, it needs to go slow.
Why Turkey? I kind of was curious, and you're Turkish. I'm adopted Turkish. Why Turkey?
Yeah.
For you?
What am I doing there?
Yes.
I went in 2007. I was introduced to November Painter. She introduced me to lots of other interesting artists and curators.
And she's a curator at SALT.
Thank you. And it felt really, it was a good fit. Like, it felt natural. And when you think of, if you already have New York City and all its resources as a base, what makes sense as a second city to open up to? It doesn't make sense to go to London or LA or places that already have these resources as well. So to go somewhere else, and at the same time I was getting involved with the world water crisis and very aware of the misdistribution of food, of clean water, of education, of medical resources and things like that. And that culture, there's so much culture in a few places, and we wanted to share that with other places. So it's in this spirit as well. Yeah.
Haro, what about you? I mean, when did you actively start collecting, or kind of maybe using that as one of the labels that you might use when someone says, oh, this is my friend Haro, he's a business person, he's Turkish, and he's a collector?
Yeah, I don't know at what point I accepted the label collector.
Yeah.
But at some point, yeah, I did that probably in the beginning of 2000s. But going back to your original question in terms of having a small sized project, basically because we have the word collector in our name, and again, a questionable decision, but immediately what people think about is champagne and canapes and people nicely dressed and basically looking at very colorful paintings. And we kind of wanted to stay away from that as much as possible. So we consciously tried to do everything a little bit smaller than what is the norm, a little bit less glossy.
What would you say is your goal?
The goal is starting conversations about collecting.
And is it happening?
We are talking among ourselves, at least. So we,
are there
to a certain
new people?
degree,
Have people kind of emerged from the woodwork that you didn't know and kind of approaching you discreetly?
Now, when we started, we knew that we couldn't promote it heavily. We wouldn't expect a lot of collectors to show up at our door. because this wasn't that kind of initiative. Having one exhibition or two exhibitions would not create a storyline for people to be able to come and see, oh, these are different reference points, and I can find my own way looking at these. We knew that we needed more data points, and after 5, 6 exhibitions, now we are creating an archive that can be a reference. And one thing that makes us really happy is when we bring the collector to Istanbul, who loans us the artwork and participates in the program. We also invite local curators, writers, local collectors, and have an intimate dinner. And there, the conversations that take place is very valuable to us.
As a matter of fact, you're the person that runs the project for you is the second member of m-est.
Exactly. It's
right.
quite incestual.
So right. But so there's natural, and you're on his advisory, he's on yours. So there is a little, but it wasn't very purposeful. I actually really didn't know that when this selection happened. How about m-est?
I was actually going to say something about Collectorspace too, which is that I think it has also become a resource for local artists, because these are the questions that many of the works that they're bringing are very challenging from a collector's perspective, be it performance or archival works or other things. So sure. I think just as people who are making work in Istanbul, I think it's very important to be thinking about these questions, and them doing these questions in publications or video interviews then involves artists who are thinking about these, because as an artist, obviously, once you make a decision, it's very hard to go back on those decisions later in your career. So that's why it's very important.
It's true. And you think of what's possible. We were talking about
exactly.
that.
So, and from a m-est's perspective in terms of discretion, as you were saying, and I think one of the things that we really cared about from the beginning is nothing that we cannot have a control of should be out there in the public, right? So if you cannot have a dinner conversation with 100 people, so if you're having a dinner conversation with 5, 10 people, then it should stay that way. So we always try to make sure that, and the three of us have very different professional roles and very different aesthetic interests that sometimes converge and sometimes diverge greatly, and this is also a public disagreement that we're also having constantly.
Is there any kind of a nationalistic place from where you created this project for Istanbul, for Turkey, for people to have a better understanding? I can say from when I lived there full-time, 98 to 2002, it's a different Turkey. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I lived there, Erdogan was in prison, and look now. But I mean, it's a different country, and it's. So was there something about how people were perceiving the scene, the artists, the players? Did any of that?
I certainly love the country, and the reality is that it fit the profile where Collectorspace had to exist. So probably that was more of a driver than anything nationalistic. Plus, personally, I'm very anti-nationalistic, so that for me was not a driver. But it was an emerging art market. Plus, it was a very interesting place to be. So it was drawing a lot of creative talent.
Yeah.
That's the best sign of a vibrant city when designers, artists, curators make the decision to move to that city rather than sent by their firm to make money. So in that environment, I thought because we knew the local area and had some connections, would be the right place to start. But I'm hoping that Collectorspace can be viable in other similar localities.
I think with us, the use of the language of English is both a nationalistic and a non-nationalistic thing at the same time, because then you're immediately alienating a certain group of people who, because English is not really taught in the fine arts schools in Turkey, but at the same time, you're also engaging your conversation with the rest of the world. So I think there's definitely those two, which we thought about a lot from the beginning of this issue of language.
I have a lot more questions, but the time is limited, and before Claudio ejects me, and I am seeing the winking, I'm going to open it up to you guys, but maybe this is the first time I've actually had the opportunity to say this, but in the questions that I asked them, I got really amazing answers, so maybe I can pass them over to you, and they can be up on your site somehow, just like a raw, because so many nice strands came out of some of the conversations that we had. So in case you don't have questions, I have more, but I'll open it up to you guys to ask questions. If you don't mind standing and waiting for the microphone to reach you, I would be very grateful.
Thank you, Michelle-Lena, Gallery Filmreif in Burghausen. I have two quick technical questions. You said you were on each other's advisory boards, and I wanted to know what the economic motor of your initiatives is.
Good question.
Economic model or motor? Haro is on my advisory committee, which means he doesn't give me any money, he gives me advice. And
ours is a horrible model.
But I can tell you the way that Protocinema survives financially.
And actually, this is really interesting.
Is I apply for grants and sometimes get them. I do personal asks to other people and get money, so private support. I'm in the process of hopefully closing some corporate sponsorship, and I developed something that I call integrated fundraising, where seeing the American model of not-for-profit fundraising, where once a year, and a lot of established and very emerging not-for-profit art organizations do this, and Protocinema is not-for-profit. Once a year, you ask all the artists you know to give you an artwork, you sell it to the highest bidder, and you keep 100% as your fundraising. That's not comfortable for me because I've been working in galleries for so many years and always working in the best interest of the artist and making sure that they don't get exploited. So what I do is during the year quietly, I maintain the ability, if everyone feels comfortable, the artist and their dealer, that I could carefully place work into good collections, private collections, and public collections. The artist still gets 50%, the gallery still gets a percentage, and the balance, that little bit that's left over, is fundraising for Protocinema. It's not the most financially, I could make a lot of money if I did it a different way, but I feel really comfortable with this. And I think that because, like we were talking about, since it's after 2008, I think if I tried to do this before 2008, the dealers would say no, you can't sell anything. But now, in fact, I'm working with dealers I've known for many years, and I trust them, and they know, and I feel that they trust me. And they say, oh, also, if you can sell this to someone, please go ahead. So timing is one good thing, but also if I was 25 and I started this, and no one knew who I was or what my track record was, I don't think I'd be able to do it either, because people know that I'm going to put it in a good collection. I'm going to tell you where I sold it. I'm going to pay you as soon as I get paid. That being an old lady doing this is not so bad either.
She doesn't mean old referring to age, just an experience. Haro.
Well,
your board members don't get any fee. They don't.
No, it's slave labor.
I know. We all work on a shoestrand, but we just sometimes need to share that.
Yeah. Basically, we are a nonprofit in the U.S. We are a tax-exempt organization, so anyone who wants to donate, please feel free. The advantage of being a small organization is that we don't need a lot of funding, but we don't buy or sell anything. We don't engage in any trade, and we try to support the infrastructure in Istanbul and sometimes beyond of the art world that gets sometimes forgotten, like the writers and the curators or artists in terms of paying them the fees. But so far, we have been managing it with individual support.
Right, and you guys really, and this is, if there's any major publications out there, we want them to hire our writers. So.
There's no money going in and out of
and you have to have secondary jobs, and you have to have they all have second jobs to be able to do this.
And the headquarters is our apartment, so that's
we meet in coffee shops.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, there's another question.
Hello, Duygu. I'm an art enthusiast living in Zurich with Turkish origin. This is a question for Haro. You mentioned that you would like to see Collectorspace in other viable new spaces. So which cities and countries is next in your mind?
Do you have a suggestion?
No, actually, my suggestion would be, what learnings would you take from your Istanbul experience to the new frontiers?
The idea was that New York and London probably don't need a collector space. I mean, over there are so many resources if you want to be engaged in collecting. So that's why we were looking for a more interesting place maybe for collector space. Now I'm thinking that maybe New York could also have a collector space, because the discussions have shifted a little bit. Rather than talking purely, trying to give examples of collecting, we are trying to talk about the critical issues around it. And those pretty much are not talked in New York or London either. So that's not to say that that would be our next step. Today I was having a nice conversation about opening a space in an alternative place that wouldn't have crossed my mind as a first instinct, because it's a European city. But why not? We look at Asia, we look at some of the other Gulf region countries. But again, I mean, the infrastructure has to be there for collector space to make sense.
And also the context.
Exactly.
The context is really important. I think that, moving things and replicating, but the conversation is happening in Zurich. It's all the discussion of 7 hours of a symposium on Sunday with Maya Hoffman and Michel Renier and Beatrix Roof. And, this is the concern now. Everybody has these amazing collections. A lot of people, curators, writers, we don't have access to it. And I think they're realizing that they have to find a new way so that more people have access. There's an art advisor in New York, Thea Westreich, and she donated, she and Ethan gave their collection away to 2 museums, making it therefore available to us. We hope that everybody does that to museums that are public so that we could go. But if they don't want to, I do think new initiatives have to come across that would give us access to that artwork.
And maybe one point that is not unique to Istanbul, but very important, is that a lot of the new institutions that are being started in Istanbul are privately funded. So the private presence is critical in Istanbul, and making sure that things are run in the right direction is also important in terms of where that art scene will go and develop. So in our program, we try to bring examples and also create some discussions that go beyond the private collecting sphere to emphasize the ethical lines and all sorts of conflicts of interest and examples that people have experienced in other markets with private initiatives maybe not going exactly the way they were intended, so that we can do things a little bit better.
Merve, if you were to just like 2 lines on where are we standing right now, and we could have also given another half an hour on the biennial for you, but where do we stand right now, a few months before the biennial, and given that the biennial's already been involved in a lot of discussion, and where do we stand as a scene? Like what from the artists, writers, institutions, what snapshot?
We've definitely been talking with people who are involved in not only the biennial, but people who are doing exhibitions outside of the biennial, in terms of, can you still do what you were planning to do? Is definitely a question that's looming on everybody's head, and that's something that I think everybody should think about in different ways. This could be part of the catalog, this could be part of the work, but I think it's also important not to exploit this situation either, because I think as producers we are all very wary of what this could mean potentially. So I think everybody is trying to be sensitive without being oversensitive or undersensitive. So I think the biennial as well is also thinking about what they're able to do, but there hasn't been any public statements about this, so we'll all wait and see. But I know that institutions on every scale has been thinking about what they could potentially do.
Well, I wanted to thank Art Basel for inviting us and allowing us to have this discussion. You have access to everyone should you wish to ask many more questions. And unless you all have a parting word. we will release you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming
listening.
today.
Yeah.
Thank you.